Cameron, here's an interesting question for you.
I'm all about interesting questions.
Can you tell us about your favorite lab story?
Ooh.
I mean, I have lots of ones that irritated me. But I think my favorite class of laboratory stories, like there was the one that I told last year, I think about the time that I made a mysteriously red oil in a second year organic chemistry lab.
Uh-huh.
And it was like brightly colored, and you should never make anything brightly colored in a second year organic chemistry lab. Like it's brightly colored liquids are usually the result of metals,
Oh,
right?
okay.
You need a high potential energy like electron transfer, which usually you only find in metals. And organic things don't do that. And the TA just kind of, like I showed it to the TA and he looked at it and was like, huh, and just threw it away into the halogenated waste, which is incinerated at a higher temperature, like the entire flask.
Yeah.
And that's like my favorite fail story just because of the way it was treated. But I think my favorite stories were just the times where I actually felt really proficient. And you got into like this vibe where you were like hanging out in the lab building because you were in like a third year lab or a fourth year lab that you had designed the experiment for. And, you know, you had to wait for something to synthesize or for a column to run or for your spectra to come back. And you'd sit back and, you know, derp around on Reddit or like listen to music and hang out with people or work on an assignment. And it just had this wonderful like vibe that I really enjoyed. And you could get to a place where you would run an IR spectra and look at it and go, yep, good. Like you wouldn't have to, you knew what you were expecting to see, you knew what peaks you were looking at, and it just felt really adept after a while. Because
Very proficient.
UVic chemistry students used to come out of an undergraduate with a couple hundred hours of laboratory time.
Oh, wow.
Which is usually the kind of experience that you only see in graduating master's students. Which may have been why the intake for UVic's chemistry undergrad program was around 400 students, and 10 would graduate.
Oh, wow. That's
was
a high attrition rate.
That was decided to be not ideal.
No, I can't imagine it would be.
Although, like, you know, you used to come out of a UVic undergraduate program and be very hireable.
That's, yeah.
Right? People would recognize it, at least in Canada, as being like somebody who probably knew what they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, if they have that many hours of lab experience under their belt.
But it was, to a certain extent, it was fun in the way that extremely stressful things are fun.
Yeah.
But when when it's 3 a.m. and you haven't slept in 3 days and you're working on a paper and you wake up your partner and say, will you still love me if I have to drop out?
Oh, wow.
That's probably not like an ideal situation that you want a lot of your undergrads to go through.
No, that's definitely not a good idea.
Cameron, Julie posted in our Slack just quick little anecdote. This is quoting Julie. I was chatting with the guy servicing our research lab's biohood, and he told me his company refuses to touch any of the undergrad labs anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd believe it. The problem with like any chemistry lab more than a couple of decades old is going to have stuff in it that is just extremely dangerous, right? Like if your university's chemistry program goes back to the 60s or 70s or the 50s, there's just going to be stuff in there that is not really safe to interact with.
That's the curse setting in.
Also, like, I've definitely had the experience of running like a a vacuum filtration where you need to take the flexible rubber tube and that you're running water through, and then you plug it into the into the drain, and finding the drain full of broken glass because somebody in the previous lab section broke a flask or something in the lab hood and just swept it all into the drain to make it go away.
Oh, jeez.
And then, like, the lab safety video we were shown in first year actually was made in the 90s, and the topic of it was a large laboratory fire that happened at the university, where, I forget what exactly happened. Did an undergraduate sweep up lithium and throw it away in the bin, and then somebody threw something wet on top of it?
Oh, no.
And one of the profs was one of the inorganic profs was talking about like having to run through a lab that was on fire, pulling hard drives out of computers to save his students' PhD work.
Oh, because this was in the 90s, you said.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have things like online backups.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, back up your work.
Yeah, we have engineering saying like, yes, please have offsite backups. This was the 90s.
Yeah.
You weren't alive back then. You were like negative 20 years old.
You say that?
You
Excuse
big
me, no, no.
babies.
I was born in 91, so I was alive in the 90s.
There you go. But like, I used to work at a place that repaired computers, and even up to a few years ago, I would have people coming in. It's like, my laptop is dead. My thesis is on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, part of the thing was, we had backups. It's there sitting on top of the computer, right? Like it's an external hard drive that's on top of the computer,
Yeah.
right? So if the hard drive fails,
yeah.
it's backed up.
But both catch fire.
Yeah.
When I started writing my thesis, I did it entirely in Google Docs. Like it lived on a Google Drive. Never, like even once I got down to, like having to like format and edit it, I would actually like upload. Every single day I would upload the copy at the end of the day back to Google Drive. So.
And, like, I feel like I'm making the lab or the chem program sound reckless at UVic, and it really wasn't. It was extremely rigorous, and I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was hard.
Yep.
It was hard. I don't know if like you remember what I was like in undergrad.
Yeah, stressed out.
Yeah.
A wild look in your eye and muttering something about compounds. Oh, I have to unmute. A wild look on your eye and muttering something about compounds.
Yeah.
Still muted. A wild look in your eye and muttering something about compounds. Jokes are always funny in threes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's the rule of comedy.
But yeah, I mean, like I feel any educational program is going to have its fair share of mistakes and errors, and
Yeah.
in a department like chemistry, those can be quite exciting.
Well, also, I would like to point out that the most interesting stories to tell are not the stories in which nothing happened because everybody followed proper procedure and no incidents
and
occurred.
like, I mean, the part of it is also like, oh man, I heard about this lab accident, from a friend of a friend.
Right.
Yes. Sort of gets passed around as cautionary tales.
Yeah, like,
true.
oh yeah, Julie, Sugarshot in chat was saying like she was working in a lab one day and the bottom of the jug of sulfuric acid she was working with fell off.
Woof. Oh.
It was an ex jug.
Yeah, and
Gave
that can
up
just
on life.
yeah, things that like. I mean, like a
things
big
fail.
jug is it's two pieces of glass that are like put together, right? And if it's not tempered properly, it can just fail, right? I saw that happen with a jug of xylenes, right? One student took the jug of xylenes out of chemical storage, and put it down on the ground to close the cabinet again. And when he touched it to the ground, it shattered.
Yeah.
Cameron, what are the chemical properties of xylenes? For chat?
It's kind of like gasoline. It's a very like a gas. Think of it like a gasoline distillate.
It's the stuff that makes Sharpies just smell like awful, isn't it?
It used to be. I don't think they put them in it anymore.
That was one of the jokes on the Alpha Flight intro. Is now with more xylene on every page.